6 years have passed since that horrendous incident. It was right before I was to take on my duties of protecting the president's daughter that she was abducted. Who would have thought that my first job would have been a rescue mission?
Resident Evil 4.
Greetings, ladies and gentlemen. This is Renegade Operative here, welcoming you to a world where memories have a little more under the hood than WMDs.
I see that the president's equipped his daughter with ballistics too.
This is my full opinionated review of Resident Evil 4. Alright, Padre, have a little faith in me to keep this under 3,000 words or less, because I'm totally not breaking the fourth wall or anything by talking to the audience. Where should I begin on this crazy journey as we talk about one of the most influential third-person shooters of all time? Just take a moment to process that in your head. Whether you love or hate Resident Evil 4, it cannot be denied how much of an impact this game has made on the shooter genre. Almost every third-person shooter you love today, like Uncharted, Gears of War, Dead Space, and The Last of Us, all borrows from that popularized over-the-shoulder concept. Resident Evil 4 was indeed Capcom's bold attempt to reinvent the series after their tenure on the GameCube led to some very underwhelming results. This was during an infamous period in time where the company buckled in and Capcom strapped themselves in with 5 titles, some of them even exclusive to the platform, that will hopefully gravitate Capcom and Nintendo's purple lunchbox to complete stardom. From all of the apparent success that came with Resident Evil 1 Remake, it also came at the price of failure, since Resident Evil 0 and a new IP called PN03 turned out to be financial duds for the company. With the pressure slowly creeping in after Resident Evil 4's numerous development cycles, we saw an executive decision had to be made. It was ultimately decided to throw out the baby with the bathwater after deciding that the signature fixed camera playstyle would be removed for Resident Evil 4. Shinji Mikami himself stated that it was time to go in a new direction as opposed to abiding by a cookie cutter format, playing it relatively safe. The humble beginnings of Resident Evil 4's development history was so outlandishly stylish that it had to be scrapped once Mikami stepped in as an advisor. Luckily for us, Hideki Kamiya managed to take the reins elsewhere to give birth to an offshoot action title known as Devil May Cry. Just like Sengoku Biohazard turned into Onimusha, we saw DMC evolve over time, gaining its own identity in the realm of hack-and-slash combat. I could dig more profusely into the history of Resident Evil 4, as the original scrap versions focused on Leon fighting what appeared to be prototype Ouroboros creatures in a giant castle. This will be the first build we've seen of Resident Evil 4 in 2002. The storyline was admittedly more engaging since Agent Kennedy was going to have encounters with Wesker's Hive host capture force after the events of Resident Evil Code Veronica X. The second build after this focused on a more paranormal approach, as Leon S. Kennedy would enter these rural interiors as a blue light emitted dangers nearby. It was a noble effort here, but outside of the cool looking Hookman enemy, I can see why this build was immediately scrapped. Resident Evil has always been about a more visceral in-your-face experience with experimented monsters. The psychological thematics just made this way too similar to Silent Hill or Fatal Frame, which isn't what I would classify as Resident Evil tonally. I guess it's ironic that this seemed to be another lost concept that got added to the creative woodpile, therefore turning the RE4 betas into other full-fledged games games because Hunting Ground was formulated from the hallucination build of Resident Evil 4. Hey, go figure, that's cool. The last build before the final release is probably the most interesting one, considering zombies, the traditional lumbering, slow walking zombies, were added into the fray last minute alongside a new human attacker. This version of Resident Evil 4 sadly never seen the light of day due to formulaic design issues. I assume those issues involved not being able to get the new shooting system to work and making zombies effectively easy by shooting them in the head and not making them ironclad like Resident Evil 2 Remake. This had to be the problem. I assume Mikami did not have all the cards on the table at the time, and I assume this is why this version of the game never saw the light of day. It's a necessary evil, considering that, like I said before, a one-shot kill headshot on a zombie would be too damn easy for a video game, so that probably led to some developmental issues within the team, saying that the pinpoint aiming makes the game ridiculously easy once you point up, shoot a zombie in the head, and he would be ultimately finished. Now this moves us to the final build of Resident Evil 4, what we have on our place today. Resident Evil 4 involves Leon S. Kennedy gallivanting around Spain on a mission to rescue the president's kidnapped daughter, Ashley Graham. She's being held captive by a mysterious cult called the Los Illuminados. The goal of the cult leader, Osmond Sadler, is to send Ashley Graham back with a plaga to affect the president, therefore taking over the United States so the cult could rule the nation. The plot just basically equates to, are you a bad enough dude to rescue the president's daughter from Farmer John's ragtag aliens? The narration of Umbrella's crumbling stock in the initial opening is a big cop-out to veterans of the series like myself, who wanted to see this evil pharmaceutical company get their own comeuppance and end with a bang and not with a whimper. That's already the first red flag in my opinion to Resident Evil 4, along with this entry feeling pretty inconsequential to the lore. Let me level with you guys. The only important thing that happens in Resident Evil 4 is just seeing a few key characters thrusted into a call to action, while Los Plagas is utilized for bigger and better things in Resident Evil 5. Despite my issues, there's a humble amount of cheesiness that I can't help but admire with the characters here. Leon is just your valiant, oddball protagonist that insults people with the most arbitrary insults. As a big fan of Barry Burton, I must approve. I gotta say, that is a level 9 Jill sandwich. I wouldn't have Resident Evil any other way than to be cheesy as a sum of its parts. The aesthetic of previous survival horror roots is lost here, however, which I have to agree with the fandom. It sucks to lose what made the series so unique from other games, which is being a horror game. It is replaced with the over-the-shoulder camera angle, quick time events, and a license to kill. If you were expecting this game to be somewhat like a survival horror game, then you might be kind of disappointed by that notion. They do have some things that might seem a little bit creepy, but nothing really stands out like you're fighting for true survival in the gameplay, because you always have ammo, you're always stocked to the brim, your knife doesn't have like an inventory spot anymore. It's like you can upgrade your attaché case to have like an entire arsenal on you. You can carry a freaking RPG. You can literally take all types of cultists on a journey to Suplex City, bitch, etc. It's very easy to harshly shun Resident Evil 4 through a pair of nostalgia blinders if you have an immense love for the previous iterations, having that tonal shift from survival horror to action. However, I think this is a competently made game in areas that only serve to enhance the gunplay while breaking the shackles of obscured enemies around each corner, getting in cheap attacks on you while the camera is your worst enemy in older Resident Evil games. Everything just feels nice. It's a nice frontal view that gives you an aim down the sights, that gives you a good perspective as you aim your weapon towards enemies' ligaments. I think it gives you a nice precision. I love the accuracy of Resident Evil 4, everything portrayed with that, everything portrayed with the precision laser system system, so if you shoot someone in the leg, he might flinch, he might grab it. If you shoot someone in the head, they'll stagger, or if you shoot someone in the arm, they might drop a melee weapon they're carrying at the time, and you can even shoot weapons out of midair that they throw. RE4 presents you with a lot of possibilities to damage weak points, to counter enemies effectively in an interesting way that cannot be overlooked. You're also introduced to a real-time store and weapon specific upgrades that could turn Leon into a force to be reckoned with, only rivaled if Goku and the Hulk fused into a giant motherfucker. You spend collectible treasures that you find throughout areas to give you access to upgrades via the one, the only, Mr. What are you buying? Mr. What are you selling? The merchant. It doesn't feel like the sense of exploration has been fully removed with this gameplay shift in RE4, only replaced with certain things that might feel familiar yet wholly different to the observer. Since this is a third-person shooter, you're going to be doing a lot of chitty bang bang to certain villagers to break up the tedium, and there's a lot of action set pieces thrown in to keep you on your feet. Some of them are pretty great, they would make John McClane very envious. Others just lead to cheap deaths because you didn't mash a QTE fast enough. Speaking of quick time events, keep your hands on that controller. Do not go to the bathroom, do not get up and eat fried chicken, do not punch someone out because you wanted a chicken sandwich at Popeyes. You will die a gruesome death if you keep your hands off the controller and you don't pay attention to the cutscenes. Near the end game of Resident Evil 4, it starts to become apparently obvious that the good pacing becomes an afterthought. Once you reach the island, everything turns into wave-based enemies. You see gun turrets come out the wazoo. You see people with arrows all over the place, bow and arrows, just shooting the ever-loving life out of your sensitive senile kneecaps. Everything that served to annoy me happened in this very section. I don't find enemies with guns scary. I never found them scary. I didn't find them scary in The Evil Within 1, and I don't find them scary here. I'm not ever going to find them creepy. I did love the mini bosses and boss battles. They did different unique things that kept me on my toes. El Gigante was way different compared to something like Sadler or Salazar, and the Krauser fight was a big war of attrition that served to test my skills with how good I really was with that knife in my arsenal. Sure, they pack on the El Gigante fights a little bit too much, but it's hard to say that RE4 boss battles are far from interesting. They're really well done in my opinion. The game has something called adaptive difficulty, which was also implemented in God Hand. You're basically tested through your actions of doing well or doing poorly. If the player is steamrolling through RE4, then the difficulty might ramp up. The enemies might become smarter and more dangerous. If you're struggling your first time around with RE4, then health items will become plentiful. The AI will also be dumbed down as well, so that might give you a helping hand once in a while. It's one of those little things that makes the game accessible or challenging if you get the hang of it really quickly or poorly. Enemies aren't slouches either. They will coordinate, overwhelm, and surround you quickly. Not to mention they can also sway out of the way of bullets, so they may be smart enough to avoid that signature critical headshot. It's best to not underestimate any enemy within RE4, otherwise you'll become food for the maggots really quickly. One of the biggest annoyances is escorting Ashley Graham, the president's daughter, in certain segments because you not only have to worry about Leon's well-being, but you also have to worry about hers, otherwise you'll get a game over. Since this character cannot defend herself, unlike Sheva Alomar or any other character in later Resident Evil games like Resident Evil 6, you'll be stuck babysitting her throughout the entire game if she's not wearing the knight armor. I'm going to be honest, Ashley Graham is not an interesting character unlike Piers Nivens and Shuri Birkin, for example. They have personality. It just seems like a wasted opportunity that they decided to make the Ashley Graham set pieces anything less than annoying, and it once again proves that point that escort missions are not fun at all. The graphics are pretty stunning for playing this on the PC. This game came out in 2005 and it still looks gorgeous. You can tell they tried to make Resident Evil 4 look even better than Resident Evil 1 Remake in some areas, with an avid attention to real-time detail. Boxes breaking, rocks exploding, heads being sliced off with chainsaws really adds that element of grisly horror to the mix. It feels like you're in a visceral world that will make you kneel if you dare to underestimate the Ganados. I played this with the Resident Evil 4 HD project mod from fans, so that gives you a little bit more graphical eye candy on PC, like enhanced textures, fire effects, and character detail. You name it, it's all there. It's just a shame that Capcom themselves didn't put much work into texture enhancement for the Ultimate HD version like the fans did. This game was ported massively everywhere. It was on PS2, Wii, PS3, it's on PS4 now, I believe it's on Xbox One, Xbox 360, PC, anywhere you can find Resident Evil 4. There's even like a mobile version, which is kind of crazy, but they had one that you could play. So you can find Resident Evil 4 anyway. I'm expecting Capcom to port this game again for the PS5 just because they simply can. The PS2 is simply the weakest version in terms of graphical prowess. I think actually the weakest would be the mobile phone, but I'm not counting that. I'm counting like just the console versions. I think the PS2 version is the weakest, and they have like these pre-rendered cutscenes that didn't show the RPD outfit in real time. That's a yikes from me. What they made up for it in the terms of like having less graphical power, they had more content, more replay value added into the mix. An additional mode called Separate Ways was implemented that gives you some story insight on how Ada Wong infiltrated this village to obtain the Plaga sample for her organization. It was like a piece of pre-DLC before that actually blew up in popularity. Also, fun fact, I remember Mikami saying that he would cut off his own head if Resident Evil 4 was ported from the Nintendo GameCube to the PS2. Even though that was a great decision in my mind, I don't understand what was the hate, what was the bias for keeping that as a GameCube exclusive. Capcom obviously made the right choice there by putting that out and letting other users experience Resident Evil 4 and cashing in on one of the biggest games of the series by far at that point in terms of ratings and reviews and all that shit. Why not port the game so other people can experience it and you make more money along the way? Mikami, what are you thinking? Why are you still not headless right now? I don't get it. That's a joke. That's a joke. I just think that's funny that he said that. I'm gonna be headless and this game's gonna be, you know, strictly on the GameCube, and it's on like 11,000 different consoles right now. That's just a funny logic, bro. Although I would say the hurt was poured on when you realize that Separate Ways gets harder later on, and the lack of an upgrading system for Ada is really notable. If you feel froggy, you can play professional mode for various unlocks at the highest level of adaptive difficulty, where enemies are smarter, faster, and stronger, and you have less ammo in the main campaign. Feeling even more froggy? Well, there is a non-canon scenario with Ada Wong. Once again, it's called Assignment Ada, where you're tasked to find 5 Plaga samples and escape the island. It's a nice little bonus, but it's not really much home to write about considering the fact that it's non-canon and it plays essentially just like a minigame. I guess if you enjoy different enemy placements and a challenge is something to do to pass the time, you might find some enjoyment. It's also just a little more cookie cutter than Separate Ways. The final piece of replay value is the Mercenaries, which is a mode that tests your skills against the clock. It's not the first time we've seen Mercenaries before in a Resident Evil game prior to RE4. Operation Mad Jackal involved you squaring up with multiple enemies to kill for time and rescue survivors. RE4 applies the basic concept of fighting enemies, but now timers are needed to continue to fight. If time runs out, the mission ends. It's essentially early horde mode where you're tasked to kill as many sub-bosses and enemies as possible while keeping up the timer. You get a 5-star rank if you do that well. You unlock a character and you get all different loadouts and abilities. Admit to yourself that it was badass seeing Krauser's arm decimate sub-bosses into Swiss cheese. That was really cool. It's not as much content as the original RE2, but they do enough that served as a great basis for co-op mercenaries in RE5, a feature that ultimately should get its own game. I think it's fun enough to basically highlight some good times with the whole Blood-Soaked family. In conclusion, RE4 was a noble attempt in doing something different. It's a game that went against the grain of its original roots. While the originality of survival horror, puzzles, and story intrigue died with this entry, it's easy to admit that RE4 gained a foundation of precise controls and added to the overall fun factor of just blowing away enemies with a shotgun as you desired. It was very well done for the time. The exploration, the appeal, the impact standing amongst the test of time, that stuff was great. And it's certainly worth your money, boasting a 16-hour campaign on your first go if you're an action junkie and you're willing to see how things progress in the franchise gameplay wise as Capcom got more accustomed to this sort of over-the-shoulder camera angle, this sort of playstyle. If you're, like I said, an action junkie, this is right up your alley. This just isn't a good Resident Evil game because of the thematics, but it is a damn good action game that led to the ultimate hybrid of Resident Evil 2 Remake. I just wish that they kept some of the scarier concepts of the original RE4 beta and figured out that enemy gauntlets just got old after a while in the pacing as I neared the end of this entry. I give Resident Evil 4 an 8 out of 10. Hopefully you guys enjoyed my review. This is Renegade Operative signing out. And honestly, I had a good time making this, and hopefully you had a good time watching this and enjoying my experience of Resident Evil 4. I don't know what's next down the pipeline. I think I might cover Killzone, but I had to do some testing with my PS3 because that was a little bit kaput the last time I checked. Be sure to follow the social media right here and go into the description below if you want to contact me on social media, chat it up, have fun. Maybe I can talk to you about joining my Discord. The possibilities are endless, even though that's invite only. If you're cool, I'm cool with you. You know, my house is your house. Blah, blah, blah. Anyway, we are signing out. I am Renegade Operative. I will see you guys the next time. Once again, be happy, watch out for the Chainsaw Village men, and as always, be safe. Later.